Hey there everyone, what's up? Back today with another impressions video, and today we are talking about Shining Blade on the PSP. And Shining Blade is the sequel to Shining Hearts, which I talked about last time. So yeah, after Shining Hearts I started Shining Blade, and it's really different. It's not the same type of game. So if you want to hear about Shining Hearts, I guess watch my last video, and you can see the definite comparison between these two games. There's a big difference. So first, we've got Shining Blade here. Um, Overall, plays completely differently. It's more of a strategy RPG. I mean, it is a strategy RPG, and the Shining Hearts was not. So let's talk about the overall game first. First, it is, like I said, it's a strategy RPG, but it's not a standard strategy RPG like grid-based strategy RPG. It's a lot more like Valkyria Chronicles than anything else. So you do have a map, but when you select your character on the map, it'll zoom in, and they have a kind of bar that, like a stamina bar, where they'll run through and they can do things during that time, so they can move in that time and then they'll get an attack. So it's turn-based, but while you're running, the enemies will attack you. So it's a lot like Valkyria Chronicles. If you haven't played Valkyria Chronicles, first, get on that. But second, there's going to be a lot of comparisons between Shining Blade and Valkyria Chronicles, because the gameplay is very, very similar. So, I mean, it's not exactly the same. There are a bunch of differences, but it's pretty similar. So if you like Valkyria Chronicles gameplay, you'll probably like Shining Blade's gameplay, because they're probably about 80% the same. But that being said, we'll talk about this in a different kind of way. I guess we'll start with the graphics, because it'll be easy to get that out of the way. But the graphics are not 2D this time. Shining Hearts was 2D, this being the sequel. You'd expect a similar kind of thing, but no. Everything is 3D models, and they look alright. It's not a... They all look like their character portraits. The character portraits are, again, Tony Taka art, and Tony Taka's art in this is just like Shining Hearts, and I say just like Shining Hearts on purpose, because the character portraits are a lot of times, I think, totally recycled. And that's not all of them, but majority of them. And I'll explain that later on. It makes sense for them to be recycled, actually, in the game. But I'll get into that later on when I talk about the characters. But everything looks good, actually. The environments are all pretty nice looking. They're relatively varied, although there are a bunch of repeat ones. So when you go through the game, you have your characters, and you get a lot. So you get about 20 characters altogether. It might be a few more or a few less than that. I didn't count, but it's about 20. And you can have, their character models all look like their portraits. So there's nothing like in Shining Hearts. The models were 2D sprites, and they were really small, so they didn't quite look exactly like their portraits. But in Shining Blade, the character models are bigger, and they all look relatively close to their portraits. So it's actually a bit of a, it looks pretty nice, even though the 2D sprites I would prefer, not really possible in this game. But yeah, so let's talk about the characters, since I'm on that topic. The characters in this game are generally, okay, if you've played Shining Hearts, you'll recognize a lot of characters in the game. A lot of the characters show back up in this game. And if you've played Shining Wind, a lot of characters from that game show up in this game. The main character, actually, here, his name is Rage, or it's actually Rage, but they spell it R-A-G-E in the game, so it's actually supposed to be Rage, which is a terrible name for character, but whatever. His sister he's actually the younger brother of one of the characters from Shining Wind. And the main character from Shining Wind, and Reiji's sister, show up in this game, and a bunch of characters from Shining Wind also, and a bunch of the enemies from Shining Wind and Shining Hearts show up. So, like when I was saying earlier that they recycle a lot of the character portraits, it's because they're like literally the same characters from those games, but you can almost tell that it's not. I don't think it would be written by the same people. A different company developed this Shining Blade that developed Shining Hearts, and I think maybe they were like, screw you, Shining Hearts, in some cases, because you start out and you meet the characters, like the main characters from Shining Hearts, pretty early in the game, and they're like, this game is like, screw you, Shining Hearts, pretty hardcore, because like, there's a male main character and a female main character in Shining Hearts, and like, the main male character from Shining Hearts is like a broken shell of a man in this game. Like, he's so awful. He hates everybody. He's nicknamed the like God of Death, and everyone thinks he kills all the people who go out with him. And the female main characters from the game are just straight up dead. Like, they're straight up killed. So like, they're in the game as kind of ghosts, but this game was not kind to the characters in Shining Hearts. Much kinder to the Shining Wind characters, but Shining Hearts characters are, yeah, I don't think they were treated so nicely in this game. And they're used a lot. You use them a lot, and they're actually pretty good characters in the game to use. Well, Rick from Shining Hearts is got a really solid attack, but he hates the main character of the game. So like, if you use them together, like, you get all these minuses. That's like another thing with the characters. Like Valkyria Chronicles, all the characters have a personality traits that are positive and negative. So, for example, in Valkyria Chronicles, there would be something like Rosie, who hated the Darks people, and the Darks were like this kind of race that everyone blamed for destroying the world before. And in this game, like, you'll have characters with those same kind of things, where like they hate certain types of people, or like in Rick's case from Shining Hearts, he hates Reiji from Shining Blades. And then you have benefit ones, like some people like being with other types of certain people, or some people like certain situations. So like, if they're surrounded by girls, they have bonuses, or if they're surrounded by men, they have negatives, or something like that. So it's a lot like Valkyria Chronicles in that sense. So you have, a lot of variety for your parties. You start out with a small party, really, and then it grows bigger and bigger. And that's like one of the problems with the game, is that when you have your party, you only have a maximum of 5 people in your party, but you'll get like 20 characters. So what'll happen is, like, you'll start getting more and more characters, and they're usually at a level similar to your party when you get them. So it's not like a huge like problem to level them up. But you'll find that like some of the characters, you have to keep swapping out a bunch of characters if you want to keep them all leveled around the same level. And it makes I guess it makes your party a little bit even if you just even everybody's levels throughout the whole thing. You won't be so overpowered when you get to the bosses. But if you didn't do that, I think you'd probably be overpowered. But I'll talk about that when I talk about the difficulty later. But let's talk about the battle system for this game, because, like I said, it's very much Valkyria Chronicles with a few adjustments. But it is a kind of turn-based active battle system, which sounds counterintuitive, but if you've played Valkyria Chronicles, you know what I'm talking about. It's a strategy game, so you have a map, and it shows the overall map and the character's positions, like a strategy RPG, but it's not a grid-based one. So what you'll do is it'll zoom out to the map, and you'll have icons, just icons of the characters, and you'll click on it, it'll zoom in, and it'll go into like a 3D, like a third-person action game. And since this is mostly swords and sorcery based, you have swords, melee attackers, and then you have magic users who are kind of ranged attackers, and then there's sort of like gun users that have like area of effect attacks that show up later in the game, but it's mostly switched between close range and long range. And what you'll do is like you'll run around the map, and of course while you're running around, enemies will attack you. But you have your stamina bar, which depletes as you move. And once you finish your moving, you can attack. So it's turn-based in that sense. It is a turn-based game, but there are these action elements which kind of fool you into thinking you're not playing a turn-based game. It feels like a third-person action game instead. And I think it worked really well in Valkyria Chronicles, and it works really well here. It does kind of take you out of the strategy elements of it, where something like Final Fantasy Tactics or something is like very tactical. You have to really think about it all the time, whereas this you're just kind of running through when there's a lot of action. So it's a little lighter in the strategy side and more actiony, even though it is still technically turn-based. But what I think, like, if you're not like a huge fan of strategy RPGs, but you think like you kind of like them, but maybe they're difficult, or maybe they're like not really your thing, you'd like something with a bit more action, this is kind of the perfect game, I think, for you. But what will happen is, all the enemies have a certain weakness, so they'll be weak to a certain type of attack or a certain element, and it's your job to kind of exploit them to get special bonuses to damage or whatever. And sometimes there's obstacles you have to break on the maps to get to treasure chests or find things of use on the map. But mostly you're just running around fighting the enemies. And sometimes there's bosses and kind of sub-bosses or bigger kind of enemies that take a bit more strategic attacks. So sometimes you'll run across like bosses that have areas to break on them. So like you'll have golems or something with a shield and a giant sword or something, and you can break the sword or break the shield to like lower their defense or lower their attack, or open up kind of weak spots where you can do huge amounts of damage to them. And that's kind of how all of the boss battles work in the game. They usually have multiple attack points, and you can break certain areas on them to open up weak spots and get through them. And most of the boss battles are dragons or golems or like boss characters. So you'll find that those are the most interesting battles in the game. And like what happens with the battles in this game is that they're really fast-paced. They're fast-paced and they're short. So you'll find that like most of the time you're not even going more than 1 or 2 full turns. So like sometimes you can get through an entire mission without the enemies attacking at all. You can just wipe the enemies in 1 turn. So like there's a lot of missions, but they're really quick. So you can it's really well paced for a handheld game where you can just kind of run through everything really well and really quickly. So it's the kind of thing you can play for 10 minutes and put down, and you'll have done a mission. And I was finding like I play on the train to work, and I'm not on the train that long, like 15 minutes or something, but I could do like 2 missions or so on the train just to work, and then 2 more on the way home, and a few more in my lunch break at work. It was like really, there's a lot of missions, like I said, but you can just blow right through them. So I think almost all of the missions, even the boss missions, aren't going to take you more than 3 or 4 turns. Maybe the last boss was like the only one that took longer than that. So it's not exactly strategic, even though it is this kind of strategy RPG. A lot of the times it's just a matter of strategically attacking. So it means like you have placement of your troops is important, and then like how you take out the enemies is important. So it involves using this kind of system that's built into the game. It's like called Concerto or something, where you have to you can link characters together. So they can link attacks. When they attack, they'll get like a option to link anybody who's close by that can also hit the enemy. And then you also have the option to kind of attach them to another person when they move. So say you moved one character his entire bar, like he couldn't move anymore, you could, if you had another character nearby, you could link them, and then that other character could move and the other one would follow even though he had no stamina left. So you kind of get extra movement by linking the characters, which is, it's a pretty good feature, and it's something you have to use well in order to beat the stages quickly. And beating the stages quickly, of course, gives you bonuses to the kind of currency you get in the game. And there's like two types. There's actual gold for buying items, and then there's soul, which is like used to upgrade your special attacks and also upgrade weapons, which is like a combination of gold and soul you use to upgrade weapons. But there are a lot of weapons in the game too, but they're mostly, I don't know, I didn't do a lot of the weapon upgrading. Well, I mean, I didn't do a lot of like building new weapons, essentially. I just kept most people with a non-elemental weapon, and I just maxed their weapons. So some people did get elemental weapons because I was running out of stuff to upgrade with. So I would just like give somebody a new type of elemental weapon so that so I could use different materials essentially. But for the most part, it's not really necessary to give everybody elemental weapons and change up their weapons all the time. You can; it's helpful if you are having trouble. But I couldn't imagine anybody having trouble with this. So yeah, you can upgrade weapons. And your skills. And their skills all have like I think 10 levels to them, but you just upgrade them with soul. It's not that difficult. And if you have a set team that you're using that you could feel like this is my good team, you can just upgrade them entirely and ignore everybody else for the most part. There are a lot of missions where you have like forced use of some party members. So if you're like not keeping track of upgrading people and leveling them up when you're not, even if they're people you're not using all the time, you might get like in some situations where you're just totally screwed because you'll have like somebody in your party who's super weak. I was actually really even with my characters. I leveled up almost everybody evenly, so I didn't have any trouble with that. But I could imagine if you had like some characters at level 10 or something, and you're like towards the end of the game, and you have to you're forced to use them, you would be significantly handicapped, I think. But there's that. But overall, I think the difficulty for this game is on the low side. It's not incredibly difficult. I don't think there's a way to change the difficulty. I don't remember, but usually, when I play these games the first time, I just play everything on normal, and then if it feels like I want to play it again, I'd play it on a harder difficulty. For the most part, for most games, unless I know it's going to be easy, and then I'll put it on a higher difficulty. But I don't think there was even an option for this. I don't remember there being one, at least. But it would have been probably could have used with a bit of balancing, like to be a little more difficult. And I think, and like for the most part, I think that could have been handled by just giving the enemies more health. Because, like I said, a lot of times you can just blow through the maps before the enemies will attack you. And that's like, there's a lot of these kinds like free battles where you'll get like kind of sub-story missions from people in the towns. And those you can usually finish really quickly. But, I guess the game would have been a lot longer if they had done that. Because there were a lot of missions, and it did take about 30 hours to do everything. And that is like, I did all of the side missions, all of the request missions, and then even after you beat the game, there's like an extra kind of, it's not a dungeon, but it's like a dungeon, and kind of special quests with not all of the female characters, but a lot of the female characters are going to get a special romance ending after the game has been beaten. I think there was like 5 or 6 of those. It might be 6 because there's 6 kind of princesses in the game that I think they all have one. But yeah, that's pretty much it for Shining Blade. The music is alright. It's not bad. But I mostly I'm playing on the train and at work, so I don't listen to the music all that much. I only listen to it when I play at home because I don't have to put on headphones. Usually on the train I just play on mute, or at work I play on mute, obviously, because I don't I don't need my entire office hearing my Shining Blade's gameplay. But yeah, that's about it for Shining Blade. Overall, I would recommend this game. It was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed this a lot more than I enjoyed Shining Hearts. And this, after the kind of Valkyria Chronicles, I replayed it recently. And playing this actually makes me want to go and play Valkyria Chronicles 2 and 3 now. But I probably will continue and play Shining Arc next. Or I got a bunch of stuff for the Dreamcast. Extra stuff for the Dreamcast too that I'm really excited about. So more than the video I made. So I don't know what will be next actually. But could be Shining Arc. But yeah, overall, I would recommend Shining Blade. It was really good. I enjoyed it a lot. And if you like Valkyria Chronicles, I would definitely recommend Shining Blades. So yeah, that's about it. Hopefully I'll be back soon with some other stuff. But until then, I will, I guess, be playing some other games. So see you guys next time.